Okay. We'll call our meeting to order. Thanks everyone for joining us for our first 2 p.m. council meeting. Happy to see people here still. So we'll start our meeting by recognizing that we are holding our meeting on the territories of the Hupachesit and Sishot First Nations. And are there any late items identified by councillors? Seeing none. Any late items identified by the city clerk? Thank you. Would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second? Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Carried. And we have the minutes of our special council meeting held at 3 p.m. and the regular council meeting held at 7 p.m. on December 10th. Would somebody like to move approval?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions on the minutes? Seeing none. All in favor? None opposed? Carried. So that brings us to public input period, which is an opportunity for the public to address council on topics of relevance to city council or anything you wish. A maximum of 4 speakers for no more than 3 minutes each. Would anybody like to speak? Come on up, Bob. And when you come up, just please introduce yourself and state your address.
Good afternoon. Bob Tangizer, 3909 Weddlestone Avenue in Port Alberni. I have a couple of things I'd like to comment on, if I may, within the time limit. First, I recognize on your agenda this afternoon you're discussing an application for funding to make renovations or improvements to Williamson Park. And I'm here representing the Gyro Club, which over the years has made significant investments in capital investments to the park, such that the name of the park is actually the Gyro Williamson Park. And we support the general scope of the renovations. We'd like to be included in the discussion and the design of that, if it's not too late, certainly for input on how it can be accomplished, and perhaps even see if we can provide some further assistance to the development of Gyro Williamson Park. The second item is, and also notice on your agenda today, you've got some discussions of wage and council remuneration and those things. And those are generally good ideas. I think the notion, or my belief is the notion of using the CPI is erroneous, because what you're trying to do is keep in place with your competition, and for salaries and wages, it's the marketplace for people, not the cost of goods and services. So CPI reflects costs of services in the community, but doesn't reflect what the average wage increases are. What you're actually doing is, I think it's the 3rd year of your mandate, you're going out to do a survey. So you're going out to look at what the marketplace is, but in the first 3 years, you're looking at raising your stipend by costs, which just seems to me a wrong way approach. I would suggest a better way would be to look at some of the Stat Canada indices that are available for the general wage increases in British Columbia for the public or the private sector, or even for a combination, and look at those as a way to keep you more in place with the marketplace than the CPI. And the final one I'd just like to comment on is there will be a public hearing later today for rezoning of the old ADSS property on Bird and to RM3 designation. Again, I applaud that. The limitation of RM3 zoning is 4 stories, 14 meters, which may not be enough for any developer who wanted to come in and make the highest and best use of the land. You make the investment for that parcel of land, and it doesn't cost any more for land as you build up. So where the developer gets the best return is building up rather than out. So you want to look at, maybe not now, but certainly in the future, of amending that zoning RM3 to make it for higher and better use. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Would anybody else like to speak? Come on up, Keith.
Hello, Keith Ambrose, 3147 2nd Avenue.
I don't even like to speak before council on this matter, but I'm a bit frustrated, so I'm going to bring it up and then take a few steps backwards, hopefully, and line up some people to talk to. But I've been a neighbor of the soup kitchen for a long time. I've tried over the years through different management that was at the soup kitchen, tried to deal with, similar issues. Never to any success. The only success I ever had was with the original owner. She had people parking on my property, and I couldn't communicate with her how, that impacted me. So when my friends came to visit, I just simply had them plug her property with their vehicles and waited. And it didn't take long, and her and I straightened it out. As soon as it impacted her in the same way, she understood. It was a rather crude method, but it worked from then on. So sometimes asking doesn't work. I've tried my limited charm. I've tried asking. But I'm going to speak for the whole neighborhood. We are surrounded by birds. A major amount of birds come on a daily basis because the soup kitchen is overflowing with food. People walk away, in this position with a box full or great large bags full of bread products. And it basically rains bagels and bread products for quite some time in my neighborhood. Quiets down for a few days, and then it just rains again. And with that, of course, comes other problems with animals, critters. We have a large amount of cats, people's cats, not feral cats, but owned and roaming cats. A rat problem is quieted down, thank goodness. But I'm concerned. I spoke to the lady coordinator. I spoke to her about a couple problems. I didn't get any resolve. Then I had an incident before Christmas that I was accosted at the soup kitchen, at the rear of the soup kitchen. I tried to return to my property, and a gentleman, I spoke to the issue last time I was before City Council. I was accosted on the way to City Council. Same gentleman verbally attacked me. I got in his face. He ended up swinging a chair at me. A couple of soup kitchen volunteers, I'll say, were there. At first, one of them tried to quiet it. I basically told him to mind his own business since he wasn't helping me. And I asked them to call the RCMP, and they just sort of looked at me, and I got no response. So I marched up to the front of the soup kitchen. I went in. There's a little kiosk there. It's quite strange now to go into the soup kitchen. You walk into a building. It's somewhat dark in the main room, and it's not a great environment, trust me. But there's a kiosk, bright, brilliant, shining glass. It's like a little world unto its own. And inside there's a manager, and there's a locked door. And it's quite shocking to me. Shocking to be in two different worlds in the same room. It'd be like having a little room in the corner where the special ones of us have to sit. More like a courthouse. But anyhow, I didn't get any help from the manager either. She didn't want to phone the police for me. And I didn't need help. I didn't need help from the RCMP for me. I needed help with a situation. They eventually came. I went home. I returned home, and I phoned from there. And they came, and the lady officer was very sympathetic to my plight. I explained to her I wasn't in any danger, although the chair was swinging. I'm concerned for a normal citizen. I'm concerned that any average citizen, I'm certainly not that, but any average citizen who found themselves in that predicament should be able to get help from a business, right?
Thank you, Keith. You are out of time, Keith, so we only allow 3 minutes at the beginning.
Thank you. I don't mean to extend my time.
No problem. Thank you.
I'll return if I have to, but I'm going to speak to their management, I think, now.
Okay.
And hopefully rectify some of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak at public input period? Okay, thank you. So on to delegations. Our first delegation is Bill Collette from the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon, Council. Thanks for hearing me out today. I'm here today to talk about the MRDT, Municipal Regional District Tax, that is otherwise known as the hotel tax. And I've spoken in front of council in the past, other councils obviously, so it's my first time in front of this council. And by the way, congratulations. It's, I guess, 3 months overdue, but my congrats. The MRDT, the hotel tax, is a program in place in British Columbia, and similar programs are in place across the continent. Almost everywhere you travel will be some sort of hotel surcharge for staying in the community. Port Alberni is one of just a couple of places on Vancouver Island that currently doesn't leverage that tax. And we find that problematic from the Chamber of Commerce perspective, from the Visitor Center perspective, that we believe we're missing out on opportunity, financial opportunity for the city of Port Alberni. How the tax works, it's 3% or up to 3%, actually 2 or 3% of the room rate can be applied to the tax, and that tax will find its way back to the destination marketing organization for use for marketing the community. And again, right now we're not collecting it. Has to be supported by at least 51% of accommodation facilities, which would include at least 51% of the available rooms. It's pretty straightforward. This slide shows you that travelers pay the tax to the accommodations. The tax gets moved to the Ministry of Finance, and it finds its way back through local government or an eligible entity, and eventually into the destination marketing organization for promotion of the community. The tax has been growing over the years. That graph kind of shows that. This, by the way, was presented to us about 15 or 16 months ago, so it's slightly dated, but it does show the growth of the program. This particular slide is the one that really jumps out at me the most, because if you look at the island, you look at all the communities involved, there's one absent community, and that happens to be Port Alberni. Pretty much every other place on Vancouver Island is currently collecting either 2% or 3%, and we're not doing that. Now, I will qualify that there are properties in Port Alberni that voluntarily collect money, and we applaud that. 4 properties, and so they do collect some money. The problem we have is that we're missing out on a lot bigger number. And that's what we're encouraging all the property owners to really consider right now. So, just so you understand, there is a destination marketing organization, and they do a good job. They recently just created a great video as example. But again, the dollars available are significant that we happen to be missing. I can just whip through these here. It's how the program works. Roles and responsibilities. I would encourage you to take a look at that and help yourselves understand how it works. But it's pretty straightforward. What I wanted to really reference here today is that right now in Port Alberni, there's more than 400 rooms that could be collecting the tax, and we're nowhere near that right now in terms of the rooms that are collecting it. Some basic math would tell me that the revenue potential in Port Alberni is somewhere between $275,000 and as much as $325,000. And I'm guesstimating at that. And how I come to that figure is if I take 400 rooms and I suggest an average occupancy rate of 60% over the course of a year and an average room night of about $100, which I think is low, you can figure out the math and determine that that's the amount of money that we are not getting in Port Alberni. And that money is paid for by people visiting Port Alberni. So nobody in this room, virtually nobody watching this today has to pay anything. This is all visitors. Just like if you travel to Victoria or Tofino, Ucluelet, or Vancouver or Winnipeg, wherever you go, chances are you're going to pay that tax, and willingly. Well, maybe not willingly, but you will pay it. And we would like to see the same thing happen here. And if you think about that $300,000 in the course of a year, and then you think about it in the course of 5 years, you're talking a lot of money that could be spent. One thing I determined today, and I'd like to just draw reference to Campbell River. Port Alberni loves to compare itself to Campbell River. And Campbell River brought in a very talented woman in, I think it was late 2016 or early 2017. She used to work for Tourism Tofino, and we all know what Tourism Tofino have done. A great job. She got the MRDT in place in Campbell River, and that started in 2017. You can go online, and I was able to determine today that in 9 months in 2018, Campbell River, based on the 3% option, have about $418,000 of revenue that they can use to market Campbell River. That's over 9 months. And when I look back at the 3 months, the latter 3 months of 2017, they collected about $85,000, which one could argue that they're looking at about $500,000 a year in Campbell River for external marketing. Those are the kinds of opportunities that I believe we're missing in Port Alberni, and I see it as a problem for our community. I would encourage you to visit the Campbell River website. It's just called campbellriver.travel. Take a look at that if you get a chance. It's a lovely website, recently produced through their collection of MRDT. It's a strong website. The other thing to take note is Airbnb now participate in the MRDT program. And that's fairly new. That was brought in by the provincial government earlier last year. And what that means is that if Joe Blow rents out a single room in his or her house and through Airbnb, communities that collect the MRDT Airbnb would automatically add in the 2 or 3% to the client using the Airbnb in that particular home. So there's an added incentive that wasn't previously there. So today, if people are collecting Airbnb in their home, they're not collecting the available MRDT tax because Port Alberni isn't involved in the program. So those monies are lost. So I really encourage us or the city to take a strong look at that. The other thing I found online today, and this was interesting for me, and I didn't realize this was a real option, but people have asked me about, you take a look at McLean Mill as an example. You guys you'll be discussing that next week, I believe, and the challenges that you face with our National Historic Site and the train and everything else. In Victoria, they can use, and it's right online here, they use the MRDT to create improvements to the David Foster Harbour pathway located within the Bellevue terminal area. So they're using it for something other than direct marketing. What's some of the other ones here? In Whistler, they can use it for improvements to the Whistler Conference Center. What that tells me is that we may have options to take this money and apply it to areas that have something to do with tourism. There's even reference to capital projects. So I really encourage council to take a really strong look at this. I've been here for 6 years in my position, and this has been a problem for my 6 years. And I just see it as something we need to address. We need the revenue. We need to market Port Alberni, and we can market it, in my view, for nothing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Ron? Sorry, Councillor Corbeil.
Well, I have an observation and then a question. I took the BC Ferry twice a week for 20 years, so I must have walked by that darn kiosk full of pamphlets, I don't know how many times, thousands probably. And I would suggest Port Alberni does not do nearly as good a job as marketing itself as many of the other communities, many of which you listed on there that already have the tax. So, I totally agree that that tax would be a wonderful thing to market Port Alberni. Another thing that monies can be used for is also for housing initiatives. And are you aware of any of those communities that are using any of those dollars for housing initiatives?
Well, I didn't study that, but you're correct. It can be used for some housing initiatives. That was a new thing last year as well. Mm-hmm. And so those are further options available to it. I'd like to just comment on the BC Ferry comment. I applaud the current AVT, Alberni Valley Tourism. They do put products on the BC ferries, and they receive criticism for not doing so. So there is product on there, but you're correct. There's not enough product on the ferries, and I hear that complaint all the time. But there is product on there, just so you know. Yeah.
Councillor Solda? No. Councillor Paulson?
We've had the MRDT in the past.
We
in
have.
this community, and historically, and I don't know why it discontinued or wasn't collected any longer, but I noticed one of our hoteliers is sitting in the audience, and I wonder if, Mr. Muggleston, if you would want to comment on the previous incarnation of MRDT, or would you prefer to be a silent majority back there?
I can comment. Peter Muggleston.
Okay, I'll get you to come up if you want to.
Peter Muggleston. I'm the chair of Alberni Valley Tourism and also the owner for the last 30 years of the Best Western Plus Barclay Hotel. In 2012, after many years of collecting the MRDT, we decided as hoteliers to cease because there was approximately $90,000 worth of revenue coming in, and $50,000 of that was spent on a marketing coordinator. In our eyes, in the business of $90,000 worth of funds coming in, excuse me, $50,000 wasn't relevant, and $40,000 to market the Alberni Valley wasn't significant enough to do a good job. So we decided, on a voluntary basis, 4 properties decided to carry on collecting the 2%, and we have been doing so for the last 6 years. 100% of that money is going towards the marketing in the Alberni Valley. We've partnered with many different organizations, including the City of Port Alberni, Hawaiian, Port Alberni Port Authority, many other partners. And we're trying to leverage that $90,000, which is still $90,000 with 4 properties. No money going out for any salaries of any sort. And to be clear, I'm not 100% against the MRDT. We've had many discussions, and I'm going to include Pat Deacon in this, how we can make our partnership stronger. And Bill was also part of one conversation, and we decided to try to partner with the Chamber. In the way this is being brought about, I'm in total disagreement. Again, not in disagreement on MRDT. It has its benefits, and yes, it can expand. The 60% over 12 months of the year, I don't think is a true fact for Port Alberni. As a hotelier, I know my numbers, and 4 or 5 months of the year are very strong, and then we deal with the remainder of the year. The winter times is a tough stretch. So how we can move forward, I think we have to all sit down on a table, including the Chamber, and see how we can present this in a better manner. In the past with the Chamber, we did have some very serious disagreements. One was the marketing coordinator, which we had no control over. And that's why we stepped back and started collecting the money on our own.
Thank you.
That answers
And
your question.
thanks, that's very helpful. And I just want to commend you on the recent video because it is fantastic. And last I checked a few days ago, it had 45,000 views, which is amazing for just less than a week out, I think. So,
Tyler Cave came up here, and his projects, if you go online, and there are many, and he's done a great job of the Alberni Valley.
Yeah,
We're
really good.
also thinking about grabbing him for this year and doing another video to add to our collection.
For sure. Thank
And
you.
another one is we are spending considerably amount of money on a new, up to about $30,000 on a new website, so we can market and show the beauty of the Alberni Valley to everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Haggard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I realize there were issues previously with the MRDT, and thank you for sharing what you know. My philosophy is when things happened 10 years ago, you learn from those mistakes and you respect what happened, but you have to move forward and for the betterment of the community. So I would like to, I'm not sure if this is appropriate time or not, but I would like to make a motion that the city support or work with the chamber in order to further investigate the implementation of the MRDT.
Is there a seconder? Okay. Councillor Schulda.
I would also like to know if the mover would like to make an amendment to that motion to include the other part of the other organization to be part of the discussions and to try to work together.
Just expand the motion.
Yes, I'll amend that motion. Thank you.
And seconder, is that okay for? Great. Any further comments? Okay, so I think it's incredibly important that if we are going to have conversations with the chamber or about MRDT in general, which I think are important, and we should be having those conversations, that we do include the current Alberni Valley Tourism Organization. There's a lot more to this, obviously, than what we've heard today. There's a lot of history that goes into it, and I think a lot of potential for our community. So I'm glad we're looking at having the conversations, but I think that needs to include all parties. So given that, on the motion, all in favor? None opposed? Carried. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and our second delegation today is Jim Sears from the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council and staff. I'd like to present 3 points here today. One is a proposal, the second one is an announcement, and the third would be just an update. The proposal is for the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation to develop a small donations program. And some may ask, why are we asking permission of the council to put this program together? And that's because the city actually controls 100% of the profits of the Alberni Valley Community Forest. So this is appropriate to bring this forward to the council. The objective of this is to increase the exposure of the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation and its role in the community. The process, we asked the City Council to approve the following: a small donations program be developed by the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation, focused on small donations put forward by community organizations and approved by the Board of Directors of the Community Forest. So a small group would put a proposal toward the community forest, and we would review it as a Board of Directors and then approve or not approve of the donation. We proposed an annual budget of $24,000, which would be done as $6,000 per quarter. Process would follow our legacy fund process in terms of request for a standard form, and the request would be reviewed by the directors at their meetings, which are normally every 2 months. The second point is I've asked our lawyers to prepare a resolution to provide the City of Port Alberni with a dividend of $150,000, representing our physical operation of 2017. Once the resolution is signed by our directors, we will present the city with a check.
Nice. Thank you.
Third point is an update. 2018 year-end accounts and audit should be presented earlier this year with a focus on being finished with the audit and presented to council or our shareholders by the end of the second quarter of 2019. The 2019 marks the beginning of our third 5-year cut control period. We have just completed our second 5-year cut control, and we expect to be on our target for that cut level. We're looking forward to another 5 years of activity, and we should be starting development and logging probably late this spring. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Council, questions? Councillor Paulson?
I love the idea of the kind of the legacy project, $24,000 per year. You may be aware that the city does have a community investment program, and possibly you may want to have some discussion with Director Thorpe with regards to guidelines, make sure there's no overlaps, and also there's some history there in learning how to vet, and so Director Thorpe, I think, has a door open to developing that project with approval. So, but I think it's a great project, and it's a great way to give back to the community. Thanks.
Yeah, as a liaison, Ron, would you be able to, Director Corbeil, would you be able to help us with that? Great.
That's great.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Councillor Solda?
I just want to say 150 is always nice to have back to us, and I just want to say thank you.
And that's representing 2017, not 28.
Okay, but still, thank you.
Yes, thank you. We always love to have people
Thank you.
come and present and tell us they're giving us money. So thanks for all the work that you guys have done. Councillor Paulson?
Perhaps the CAO would like to make a comment on the legacy or the dividend funds and what the eligible funds are eligible for within the city's purview.
Madam Mayor, excuse me while I look through a document here. As Mr. Sears has said, any funds surplus to operational needs are returned to the city or forwarded to the city as a dividend, the city being the 100% shareholder of Community Forest. The city has a bylaw to establish a Community Forest Reserve Fund. And so it's been practiced to establish, unless otherwise directed, for council, for those funds, any dividend funds to be installed or placed into that reserve fund. I'll just read from the bylaw. The bylaw must be known and cited for all purposes as the Alberni Valley Community Forest Reserve Fund. Dividends received from the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation and interest earned on the fund balance shall be placed to the credit of the Alberni Valley Community Forest Reserve Fund. Monies from the Alberni Valley Community Forest Reserve Fund will be used for projects benefiting the Alberni Valley as a whole. The money in the reserve fund will not be used for city operations. Disbursement of funds will be made upon direction of council. Does that help?
Absolutely.
Councillor Washington? Same question? Okay, great. So thank you very much.
One other thing, I've got two directors with me here today. It's Gary Swan and Chris Duncan. Chris Duncan actually was the chair of the Legacy Fund, I believe. Where was this? Yeah.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
So as a follow-up to that, I have two motions to make. I would like to move that we ask the city to work with the Community Forest Board and come back with a report for options for the donation program.
I'll second that.
Second. Any questions on that? Okay, all in favor? Carried. And then as a follow-up to that, quite a few months ago on our last council, we did ask for a report on the Legacy Committee, and I think we had been contemplating changes for it. I can't remember exactly what the basis of the report was, but I think this would be a good time to have an update. Consider the terms of reference and let council discuss if this is the way we want to move forward or if there are any changes before money comes into that. And we ask volunteers to do work. So I'll ask for a report on the terms of reference of the current Legacy Committee structure.
And second that.
Second. Any questions? All in favor? None opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on to item E, unfinished business. And item number 1 from the city clerk is response to questions from the December 10th, 2018 meeting. City clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As council will recall, Mr. Anderson asked for some information regarding funds expended during 2018 to retain John Van Dyke as a contractor, as well as how much staff could spend without authorization from council. All of that information was previously provided to council at a regular council meeting last July. So the entire report is just attached to this agenda for council's information.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move receipt?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Solda.
I must have missed it, but what was the deliverables? What did Mr. Van Dyke give us? Like, was there a deliverable?
Madam Mayor, the report is included in the agenda package. I don't
did
have
read it, but okay, I'll take another look at it, and maybe I missed it.
CAO can potentially answer.
CAO.
Madam Mayor, we'll project the report up on the screen. Let's see what we find there.
Like, did he actually deliver what he said? That's why I'm asking why I'm asking that question.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'm just looking for the actual engagement letter. So Mr. Van Dyke was engaged on 2 occasions, 2 separate agreements, and with some deliverables in that he was to work toward some ends. And I'm not familiar if any of those are large items. I'm not sure if any of them were actually realized. And you can see on the screen there, they are large, like the client is seeking venture capital for a variety of private projects identified in the City of Port Alberni Economic Development Strategic Plan for the purpose of strengthening and diversifying the economy. The projects include, but are not limited to, component industries of a maximized value wood biomass cluster. That is no small thing. A resort development on Sprout Lake. Plants manufacturing carbon neutral products, seniors care facilities, and the Port Alberni Transshipment Hub. So Mr. Van Dyke was working on securing venture capital, if you like, for those larger projects. I'm not aware that any of those were actually achieved, but he did work toward that end.
I guess
Does that help?
that's, like, I knew those were the deliverables, but I wasn't sure if he actually delivered, because I didn't see anything there.
The second contract had a provision for a balloon payment at the end if one of 4, I believe, goals were met, and in the end, the city did not pay out on any of those potentials.
Interesting.
Thank you. Any
you.
further questions from council? Okay. On the motion to receive then, all in favor? None opposed, carried. Okay, and item F, staff reports. Item 1 is accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the certification of the Director of Finance dated January 14, 2019 be received, and checks numbering 142856 to 143056 inclusive, and payments of accounts totaling $3,186,119.89 be approved.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second, all in favor? Carried. Item 2, from the Chief Administrative Officer, Government to Government Accord. CAO.
Madam Mayor, the city has reached a tentative agreement with Sachot First Nation on a government-to-government accord. You will recall that in the past we've had what we called a protocol agreement. This is a very different looking document than previously. We've used the term accord as opposed to protocol agreement. It is very much a government-to-government document. I will summarize the entire accord, I think, is summarized by the final therefore and purpose, so I'll just read that if I may. Now, therefore, the parties enter into this accord with the intention and desire to establish a cooperative government-to-government relationship for the purpose of sharing information and improving communications, addressing specific concerns, and raising awareness and understanding of Sachot First Nation title, rights, and responsibilities, and the rights of the city under the Community Charter and Local Government Act. And the purpose of this accord is to enter into a more formal arrangement between the Sachot First Nation and the city with respect to establishing and maintaining a long-term cooperative government-to-government relationship through effective communications. The remainder of the document is essentially fleshing out some specifics around those statements, Madam Mayor.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Solta, would you like to make the motion?
Yes. I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni endorse the government-to-government accord between the Sachot First Nation and the City of Port Alberni as presented.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Are there any questions? Comments? All right. I just want to say before we vote how thrilled I am to have this accord. It was a big initiative of our last council and through the Reconciliation Committee. I think we have done a lot of work moving toward this. I think the relationship building has started a long time ago, and now being able to sign this document or moving toward that is just further putting us on the right path. So very excited for this. So on the motion, all in favor? Great, none opposed, carried. And item 3 from the Chief Administrative Officer, Government to Government Accord, if you have any other comments you want to make for this one.
Madam Mayor, a separate document and one between the city and a different First Nation government, Hupechesset. And both the city and the Hupechesset First Nation have entered into, or tentatively entered into, an agreement subject to council's decision with a document that looks essentially the same as the previous one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Paulson, would you like to make this motion?
I'd be more than pleased to. The Council for the City of Port Alberni endorse the government accord between the Hoopachesset First Nation and the City of Port Alberni as presented.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? Okay, again, on this one, this is very exciting. And I just want to comment how much of a positive I think it is that we are signing accords with both of our local First Nations. On the question, all in favor? Carried. Item 4 from our consulting city planner, development permit number 1806 for 4410 Glenwood Drive. Either come on up, Mr. Kalenda, if you want to give us an overview.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Yes, this is an application for a development permit, and this is phase 2 of a construction program at this address. Phase 1 was done in 2017, and it is and was a 14,000 square foot storage metal building prefab. Phase 2 will be a 9,000 square foot metal prefab storage building. And so the applicant has made application for a development permit. We've reviewed the plans, everything looks fine to us. The new building will be almost identical to the existing building, except that it's slightly smaller, and there's a photograph of it on your board now. So our recommendation is that Council for the City approve development permit number 1806, and that the clerk be authorized to sign the permit, including the following Schedule B development plans attached, and there's quite a few of them. So we recommend approval and issuance of the building permit.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, the development permit.
Okay. Are there any questions from council on the details? Okay, thank you. Councillor Washington, would you like to make those motions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni approve development permit number 18-06, and that the city clerk be authorized to sign the permit, including the following Schedule B development plans attached. A.
Read them all. Do we need to read them all?
Schedule B plan, site plan, drawing number 3458-C01 as amended with additional building shown in blue pen. B, Schedule B, drawing number 1, building layout. C, Schedule B, drawing number 2, anchor bolt plan. D, Schedule B, drawing number 3, roof sheeting. E, Schedule B, drawing number 4, roof framing plan. F, Schedule B, drawing number 5, sidewall sheeting and trim, frame line A. G, Schedule B, drawing number 6, sidewall sheeting and trim, frame line C. H, Schedule B, drawing number 7, sidewall or end wall sheeting and trim, frame line 1. I, Schedule B, drawing number 8, end wall sheeting and trim, frame line 9. J, Schedule B, drawing number 9, frame, cross-section, frame line 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Second. Any questions? All in favor? None opposed? Carried. Thank you. And item 5 from the Manager of Human Resources, Salary Administration Exempt Staff Remuneration. CAO, would you like to just give us a brief overview of the report? This is just a follow-up from our last direction given, but just for the public.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I'd like our Human Resources Manager, Krista Tremblay, to speak to that.
Wonderful. Come on up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Enclosed with the package is my very brief report accompanied by the revised version of the Salary Administration Exempt Staff Positions Policy. This revised policy includes the 2 items as directed by Council, and you'll find them as number 9 and number 10, related to annual salary adjustments being equivalent to the BC CPI on an annual basis, and the review and update in each third term of council's, the third year of each term of council's term. The rest of the policy is exactly the same as the previous policy. Those are the only 2 updates made to it. And if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from council? All right, Council. Thank you very much. And Councillor Haggard, would you like to make the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report from the Manager of Human Resources dated January 8th, 2019 be received, and Council for the City of Port Alberni adopt the policy entitled Salary Administration Exempt Positions as presented, replacing the previous policy dated May 9th, 2016.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second. Any questions? Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can this report or this document be revisited any time if we find, like Mr. Canagizer had said, we can still open it up and review it anytime?
I would think absolutely. Would you like to comment?
No, absolutely would be the answer. So this is the policy in place currently, and it could be subject to review and revision as directed by council.
Great. Thank you. Any further questions from council? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 6 from the Manager of Bylaw Services, Secondary Suites. Come on up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The report in front of you is in regards to secondary suite provisions under the zoning bylaw. So to give you some historical context, back in 2015, Council directed staff to prepare a report on secondary suite provisions and conduct a review. So my report highlights the definition of secondary suites as it currently is under our zoning bylaw. And I've also provided the current provisions that we have in place. So I've highlighted in my report some pros and cons of secondary suites, but I think it's important to note the topic for discussion today isn't are secondary suites permitted or not. They're already in our zoning, in our R zones. The question I brought to your attention today is in regards to section 6.22.4. And it states that secondary suites are only permitted in an owner-occupied single-family dwelling. So I'd like council to consider an amendment to this provision and perhaps raise the pros and cons for having this provision on or not. And so to give you some further information, the Bylaw Services Department has run into a number of incidences, whether receiving a complaint or going onto a site for a different matter, where we've come across secondary suites that are considered unlawful due to this provision. So most of them that we've come across could be considered safe, whether that's a life safety check that our building official conducts, whether they have a permit or not, it could be considered a safe dwelling. But the issue we run into is the fact that there's no owner on site. So the result of having this bylaw provision in place is if the owner is not living in the single family dwelling, the tenants below are going to be evicted because they're not in compliance with the secondary suite provision. And being a community that is in a housing crisis, and there's affordable housing, as a hot topic, it's worth discussion on whether we want this provision to remain. So my report does highlight the pros and cons. The pros is ensuring that there's safe housing for members of the community, whether that's a long-term tenant above and a long-term tenant in the suite. The con, of course, there is a negative impact. You're having an absentee owner not present, and there would be 2 potential long-term housing fulfillments and dwellings. So I've put some considerations before you and would just like some input if a recommendation to amend that provision is necessary or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from council? Councillor Corbeil?
Well, I can understand the pros and cons. I was really surprised when I read this to find out that there had been a number of cases where people had been kicked out because the person upstairs wasn't the actual owner. Can you put numbers to that? Is it dozens? Is it hundreds?
I wouldn't have numbers offhand, but I can comment that in the last few months, as we've increased our resources for bylaw services, we've been able to get out to more sites and deal with more complaints, and that has resulted in finding a significant higher number of illegal secondary suites. To give you an idea, I'd say, talking to my officers, we've come across maybe 20 in the last couple months that would be considered unlawful.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Solda?
Yeah. Just going back into like Vancouver and Victoria and that, they don't always have their owners there. They have people upstairs, downstairs, third floor, and et cetera. So why are we so behind? Is it just the way we are?
We are.
Yeah.
I can comment, Madam Mayor. A couple things I did point out in my report. Back in 2005, the BC government did provide a local guide to local municipalities, and they recommended moving away from requiring that an owner-occupied suite or single-family dwelling be used to permit secondary suites. They do believe it was subject, even back then, to a legal challenge, and it is a position I have consulted with our planning department as well, and it is staff's position that it could be legally challenged. The rationale is you tend to regulate, by doing so, you're regulating the user and not the land use, and that's moving away from the intended zoning bylaw.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. Yes, I found it interesting to read in your report that the province cautions against the current model that we have. So I thought that was very interesting. I'm happy to see this come forward. I have talked about it a number of times. I know that there are potentially unintended consequences if there happen to be, if we happen to allow more suites that then are not run well. But I think that we still have the tools to deal with those suites that are not well run. And at the end of the day, if we have safe housing in our community, it should be allowable housing, especially in the type of housing crisis that we have right now. And a lot of these suites are there already anyways, and not being regulated. So this gives us a mechanism to regulate them. Would somebody like to move receipt of the report? So moved. Okay, second, Councillor Poon? Okay, great. And a second.
Second.
Any questions on the report? Further questions? All in? No? Okay. All in favor on receipt of the report? And I will move that Council for the City of Port Alberni authorize staff to prepare amendments to the city's zoning bylaw for the consideration of new definitions and provisions relative to secondary suites. Seconder? Any questions on that motion? Comments? Okay, all in favor? None opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.
Look at the smile on his face.
And mine.
Yes.
Item 7, again from the Manager of Bylaw Services, new business license bylaw.
thank you, Madam Mayor. So I've provided a report requesting Council's consideration to propose new bylaw provisions in regards to business licensing. Typically, a new bylaw would be brought forward, and that's when I would propose it. The reason I've preemptively provided a report is because Council did direct staff to bring forward amendments to the business license bylaw in regards to retail cannabis businesses, and so that is coming at an upcoming meeting. However, upon reviewing the current business license we have, I documented some changes that could be made. I had the opportunity to sit down with the Director of Economic Development, where business licensing lives, and receive some positive feedback on how we can improve the business license bylaw by increasing some provisions surrounding home occupations and other types of businesses, such as retail. And further to that, some new classifications that could potentially be introduced into our community for businesses to be brought in. So my report highlights specifically home occupations, some provisions relating to that can be amended and updated. There's also a topic of Airbnbs and short-term rentals. So I provided a small little paragraph there just to give you some context. In June 2018, Airbnb reported to having over 4 million listings in 65,000 cities across 191 countries. So as most of us are aware, Airbnb is almost everywhere. It's not currently permitted here in Port Alberni. So we allow for an Airbnb listing to go up in regards to bed and breakfast, but we don't actually allow a tourist accommodation business or a short-term rental business. So my request is to propose a new business license bylaw with these classifications for council to consider. And just to make you aware, we would want to consult, the business community and members of the public, and we would hope to engage them after first or second reading when we have an idea of what those provisions might look like.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council?
I just have
Councillor
one
Soto?
thing. Would the Chamber of Commerce and the hotelers and that be involved in this discussion?
I think it would be important for anyone who
Good.
may be affected or involved in this community to be
Okay.
receive input.
Do we know how many are in Port Alberni right now that are operating roughly?
I know that we have.
No, I know.
I know that we had received some complaints, so I did in the summer look at Airbnb, and there was about 20 to 30 listings at that time when I looked. So they are being listed, just not regulated.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Poon, did you have a question?
Just a general comment. I think it's pretty exciting that we are considering Airbnb as a business, and I think it's a good way to expand the number of accommodation options for tourists. So, yeah, I'm in support.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Just a quick comment once again is Airbnb has grown exponentially and actually grown like wildfire. And Mr. Scott, you've come from Tofino, and I would suggest that we move forward rather cautiously. And I know that Tofino has had to be a little bit reactive with regards to Airbnb, eating up accommodation for staff workers in actual local accommodation period, which creates a housing shortage. And they have created a way of tracking, which I think is really important, that if we're moving into this area, that we need to be able to track it and make sure that we're not adversely affecting our housing shortage as it already. So I applaud moving forward on it, but there are some negative sides to it as well. So if we do it right, we can be a trendsetter.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I want to just really echo Councillor Paulson's point. I think it's exciting that we're talking about moving forward with Airbnb. This is, I think, something that could negatively impact our community and our housing supply if we don't do it properly, and if we maybe move forward without giving full thought and consideration. But at the same time, I think this is another example of something that's already happening in our community, and we're not regulating it. We're not talking about where we want them or how they should operate or what kind of requirements they need to have. They're just operating how they want to operate. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to put our minds to what type of regulations we want. Any further?
Madam Mayor, if I may, as part of this new business license bylaw, I commented at the start that there will be provisions for retail cannabis. As part of that, I just wanted to extend out to council and ask for their consideration. All of our retail cannabis discussions for provisions have been discussed, but nothing about fees or the cost of a fee for a business license for a retail cannabis business. And as a bylaw amendment or a new bylaw comes forward, I will have to consider that. So I'm just wondering if council has any thoughts on regulating that number.
Okay. Councillor Poon?
Has the fees of other communities been studied?
It hasn't at this time, but it would be part of the process for reviewing the fees.
I think we should be competitive with other communities.
That's my comment.
Okay, great. Councillor Haggard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Previous to October 17th, what was the business license fee for the medicinal cannabis retail stores?
The Director of Development can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe $132 for a business license for medical marijuana.
I think it was
Higher?
higher.
Okay.
How shall we say? It wasn't positioned in a way that allowed the community to benefit.
That's right.
We'll change it.
So I'm hearing we want to be somewhat in line with other communities, but I think it's important personally for us to consider the additional work that comes with these businesses and regulating. And I think that's something that we talked about with I know it's not the same as the medical marijuana, but that was a conversation that we had. We talked about increasing the fees because there was a lot more administrative work associated with regulating marijuana businesses. So if cannabis is similar, then I think we should be looking to have a higher fee to offset those costs. So I think within reason.
Thank you.
Okay. So would somebody like to move receipt of the report?
So moved.
Moved. Is there a seconder? Second. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And Councillor Poon, would you like to make the motion to
Sure.
that one?
I'll move that the Council for City of Port Alberni authorize city staff to draft a new business license bylaw for the consideration of new classifications to business licensing.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second. Any questions on the motion? All in favor? None opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Oh, item 8, we have Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, the Recreation Infrastructure Grant. Welcome, Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the process for the Recreation Infrastructure Grant has been very unique and a bit of uncharted territory, I think, for the department. So a couple of items to bring forth to council before we discuss the grant itself. First of all, with the timing of the election, as well as the grant submission timelines, staff didn't have the opportunity to engage council and confirm what your strategic priorities are before we explored the grant. Secondly, when I presented at the December 10th regular meeting of council, the Regional Districts Board meeting hadn't yet occurred. At the Regional District's December 12th meeting, the board at that point confirmed that they would not be submitting a grant application for this initial intake. Thirdly, between that meeting of the Regional District as well as when I had submitted the report in front of you today, staff had 11 days to prepare the site plan and also cost out the entire project. And also considering the condensed timeline, staff weren't able to engage community groups, user groups, any potential partners on what that project might look like as well. Additionally, it's my intention that staff will include dollars in the 2019 budget process for project planning initiatives, so we can start to build, as I mentioned in previous meetings, we can start to build those shovel-ready projects for when future grant opportunities arise. We've already got projects ready to go in the hopper there. So more specifically to the proposal in front of you today, this $4 million project represents a refresh of Williamson Park. It focuses on inclusion, integration with existing features, and also promoting efficiencies like solar power. And the city's portion of the grant, so just over $1 million, you see the 26.67% on the screen there, would come from the Parks, Recreation, and Heritage Capital Reserve Fund. So we do have dollars available at this time. And I'll turn it over to council for any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yep. Councillor Solda.
Just a question. Did you not consider a skateboard park? I know there's been such a call for a skateboard park, and I think it would be a great area.
Yes, absolutely. So, Madam Mayor, yes, we have considered a skate park as well. And as in the event we are successful with the grant funding, we would look to integrate the sort of balancing the existing green space that is still there on site, as well as potentially adapting the different features you see there to possibly make room to have a skate park in addition to the features you already see.
Nice. Okay, that's important.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if Mr. Kannegizer again suggesting gyro would help you with this park, if you got him to build the skateboard park, say, would that affect your grant monies in any way?
No, we've actually incorporated the cost of a skate park in this same $4 million grant. So it is considered. And of course, we would engage gyro. Yes.
Super.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, and that was actually one of my questions, if you're going to be willing to work with the JRA, because they're always good to help funding these kinds of projects as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And Madam Mayor, it's frustrating to stand in front of you when we haven't engaged, like you mentioned, properly in my mind. And so this idea of scrambling around so that grant opportunities don't come and go is obviously a very frustrating spot for everyone to be in. So if I'm a member of the Gyro Club, I'm wondering what does that do to our relationship with the local municipality when there's staff members standing here presenting grants that they haven't even been consulted on, and they've been wonderful partners up to this point. So it's exactly our intention moving forward of looping those folks in and having them involved, and also improving our process. So we are only presenting grants when we've done a fulsome study prior to.
Yeah, I just want to say I think this is a wonderful concept, and I always thought Williamson Park was very underutilized, a lot of vacant land there. So kudos to you and your team for developing this in such a short time frame as well. Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, the park was first developed in 1957, so I think it's due for, and its most recent refresh actually was the new playground and fall protection there over 10 years ago. So
that's great. Thank you very much. Councillor Solda.
Just one more question. A lot of our parks haven't got shade covers over, and the kids can't play on the swing slides and et cetera, right? Does this, I don't see anything that reflects that. Will there be something that will have shade and?
Yeah, so working with our parks operations supervisors, so we would develop some ability to provide shade as well, whether that be in some of the new trees that we've indicated on the site project or site plan, as well as incorporating into some of the new structures and ability to provide shade.
So they can play?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We can also let our children just be a little more dangerous.
Ew. I don't want to burn.
Thank you very much for this, for putting this together. I recognize it was a very short time frame, and you've done a great job. It's exciting to see this concept. I know it's something that one of the Rotary clubs has had conversation about as well, so I'm sure that will be a part of the process, but there may be further support there if this is successful. I will move receipt of the report dated January 4th. Is there a seconder? Second. All in favor? Carried. And Councillor Corbeil, would you like to make the second motion there?
I move that the council for the... Let's use this thing. I move that the council for the city of Port Alberni support a grant funding application for project 1C0107 Williamson Park refresh through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Community, Culture, Recreation Stream, and commit to its share of $1,066,800 of the project.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second, Madam Mayor. Any further comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Item 9 from the City Clerk is a lease of property to Handy Andy Maintenance Limited. City Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a renewal lease for a further 2-year term for a portion of lane adjacent to Handy Andy's property on Bird Street. The annual lease rental is $375. It has been increased to reflect commercial rent CPI.
Thank you very much. Councillor Solda, would you like to make that motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni authorize the Mayor and Clerk to enter into a lease agreement with Handy Andy Maintenance Limited for the portion of the lane adjacent to the property of 4917 Bird Street for the 2-year period of the cost of $375 per year plus taxes effective January 1st, 2019.
Thank you. Seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Great. Any questions on that? All in favor? Carried. And item 10 from our Chief Administrative Officer, 2019 to 2023 5-year financial plan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On your screen, you'll see a schedule, and in front of you, hopefully a report. And right off the bat, I see a couple typos. I've got 2018 in the table where it should say 2019, right at the bottom there. So, Madam Mayor, this report just outlines the proposed process that we would undertake for council to consider the 2019 to 2023 5-year financial plan. On January 21st, we will be hosting a special budget meeting from 1 till 3. And at that meeting, Madam Mayor, yourself will be hopefully outlining the direction, council's direction for which this budget is targeted. This draft budget is intended to meet council's previous direction. We'll talk about any service impacts that are expected as a result of this draft financial plan. We'll review the 5-year capital plan, primarily 2019 and 2020, I would say, and review what we've been calling in previous years a project options list. So we've had some success in the past couple of years with staff bringing a list of projects that staff see as priorities, and hopefully there's some unallocated funds available for council to allocate those funds for projects from that list that are priorities for council as well. Then on the 28th of January, which is a regular council day, we'll have a special budget meeting that same evening, and we'll look at that meeting. We'll go over whatever's left on the draft financial plan to recover. Sometimes we have to go over the projects list or the capital list. It takes a while. And at that time on the 28th, we would ask council to help us finalize the options list. So in other words, if individual councillors have projects that you want all of council to consider, that would be the time the last time, hopefully, for you to put those items on that list. And then going forward, council would have a finite list of potential options that you might include into the financial plan. We'll meet a week later on February 4th, and at that point and all subsequent meetings, council will begin to ask questions and give direction. And so oftentimes council will ask questions for which staff don't have the answers at hand, and we'll bring them to a subsequent meeting, and council will make decisions based on those. And we would hope to meet not weekly beyond that, because it's challenging at the staff level to turn around the direction of council from one meeting to be prepared for the next meeting if it's only a week away. But we will meet as often and as frequently as we need to. And scrolling to the bottom of the page where we are there, some hard deadlines for us. We have, we're obligated by the province to provide a tax rate bylaw by May 15th of each year. And in order to be ready for that and take advantage of our regular meetings of council, we would want on or before March 25th to have council give 3 readings to a financial plan bylaw. And that leaves us time on the 8th for, what does that say, adopt the financial plan and give 3 readings to the tax rate bylaw. And April 23rd would be the adoption of that bylaw. Does that help, council? Yeah.
That's helpful, thank you.
And Madam Mayor, this is council's process. It's easy.
Sounds easy.
It's council's process, and really you need to tell us what you need, and we'll deliver that.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Solda?
Yes, Madam Mayor, just a quick question. Public consultation to be involved in the process, is this during all this, or are we going to have a special meeting on that?
I would think we would invite we have to invite
Yeah.
public to be a part of the entire process. All of the meetings indicated will be open meetings. We have done other types of budget meetings in the past additional to that. And so again, it's council's decision how much public engagement we want to do, if we want to do meetings outside of City Hall, if we want to do e-town halls. And I think we can continue to discuss that.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
correct.
Great. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay. Councillor Paulson, would you like to make that motion?
I'd like to move that the report from the CAO dated January 10th, 2019 be received and council proceed with consideration of the 2019 to 2023 5-year financial plan, generally as outlined.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Second. All in favor? None opposed? Carried. That takes us to item G, bylaws. And item number 1 from the city clerk, December 10th, 2018, public hearing. City clerk, do you want to give a brief overview for the public?
Perhaps our consulting planner might want to do that, Madam
Sure,
Mayor.
that's great.
We are talking about the microbrewery bylaw, right? Yes, okay, so this is up for 4th reading and adoption, and when you do that, microbrewery will become a permitted use in the C7 district, C7 zone, whereas now it is a defined use in your zoning bylaw, and it is a permitted use in C2, C3, C4, and M1. And I just want to check that when I go back and review my zoning bylaw. If it's different, I will email you, but I believe it is a permitted use in those 4 zones. We've gone through the public hearing, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd reading, and now it's open for final and adoption.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Haggard, would you like to make that motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report of the public hearing held December 10th, 2018 regarding bylaw number 4974 be received.
Is there a seconder? Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Item 2, just to follow up on the last one, from the Development Services Technician, zoning text amendment number T16, microbrewery in C7 core business bylaw number 4974. We have a report dated December 12th from the Development Service Technician to consider final adoption. Councillor Washington, would you like to make those motions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report from the Development Services Technician dated December 12th, 2018 be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Second. Any questions on the report? All in favor? Carried. And continue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, that the zoning text amendment number T16 microbrewery in C7 core business bylaw number 4974 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal and numbered 4974.
Seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. And item 3, we have from the Manager of Bylaw Services, Council Remuneration and Expenses Bylaw 2019, Amendment Number 4, Bylaw Number 4835-4. Would the CAO or Manager of Bylaw Services like to just give, again, a brief overview for the public?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On December 10th of 2018, Council for the City of Port Alberni resolved that the report from the CAO from December 4th be received and basically put forth an amendment to Council's remuneration bylaw to be prepared for consideration. So that's what you have before you, and this amendment will amend Section 2, and you can see in the discussion section I've expanded on quite a few provisions as requested by Council. And we've also removed Section 3 as it's no longer applicable.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from Council? City Clerk?
Oh.
Just a comment, Madam Mayor, and for Council's information, there was an amendment to the bylaw that was presented in the agenda package. It was distributed on your desks, and it is on the screen in front of you. Essentially taking out the years in 2.1, because the one included in the package reflected years 2019 to 2022, which effectively would have made the bylaw end at that time. So we just took out that wording and said effective January 1st of each year, mayor and council remuneration shall be increased by a percentage equal to BC CPI from the previous year.
Okay.
So just so we're clear on that.
Great. Thank you. Questions from Council? Okay, great. Councillor Solda, would you like to make those motions?
Okay, I move that the report from the Manager of Bylaw Services dated January 7th, 2019 be received.
Seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? None opposed? Carried. Continue.
That Council Remuneration and Expense Bylaw 219, Amendment Number 4, Bylaw Number 48354 be introduced and read the first time.
Seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Continue.
That Council's remuneration. An Expense Bylaw 219, Amendment Number 4, Bylaw Number 48354 be introduced and read a first time.
Second time.
A second time, sorry.
Okay, seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried.
I'll need my sidekick. That Council's
Remuneration
and Expenses Bylaw 219, Amendment Number 4, Bylaw Number 48354 be read a third time.
Great. Seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
I speak English. I do.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item number 4 from our Consulting City Planner, Advisory Planning Commission. We've got the minutes in front of us. Are there any questions from council on this? No. Okay. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to make the motion?
I move that the summary report of the December 20th, 2018 meeting of the Advisory Planning Commission be received and all recommendations accepted.
Seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried. The next unnumbered item. Zoning text amendments number T17, Cannabis Retail Store Regulations, bylaw number 4979, following up on our direction from one of our last meetings. Are there any questions on this before we read the bylaws? Councillor Solda?
Just one thing. When I was reading this, I noticed, I know we made discussion regarding smoking near the stores and that, and it's in there. But what about the parks and that, and just like cigarettes, you know, like there's rules and regulations. You can't be out a few feet away from a restaurant or a store in front, but I don't see that in here. Am I missing it?
No, but it doesn't rightly apply here.
Okay.
Apply here because this is your zoning bylaw amendment,
Okay.
which will make cannabis retail stores a permitted use in the C2, C3, C4, C7 zone. Okay, the anti-smoking bylaw or the clean air bylaw, I believe, is a bylaw of the ACRD, and that's the bylaw which designates where you can and cannot smoke. And in that bylaw, it does say 7 meters, I think, from a public doorway. And I believe it does say not in public places and parks and open spaces and such. And I believe it also defines what smoke is, and it defines tobacco as smoke. I don't think it defines cannabis as smoke yet. And maybe that's a change that needs to be made in the anti-smoking bylaw, or the clean air bylaw, as the case may be.
Totally agree, because we've had a lot of comments. I've heard a lot of comments about the parks and that, and people don't want it near their kids, and
Yeah.
so, okay. Oops.
Mr. Bylaw.
Come on up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We do have a smoking bylaw that is very, very old. I'd say one of our oldest bylaws that has not been amended or updated. If council wishes or desires, I think it would be appropriate to put forth an amendment or new provisions regarding smoking to encapsulate also cannabis as well as part of the definition of smoking or cigarette or things like that.
Would that be a separate motion, Madam Mayor? So could we do that?
We could make it first if you like.
So I move that we do update our bylaws regarding the smoking and include the marijuana in it.
Is there a
Update it.
seconder?
I'll second that.
I think it's called cannabis now.
Cannabis,
I'm not
okay,
totally sure,
marijuana,
but
okay.
I think it's cannabis.
All right, let's get the term
Any
right.
questions on that? So this is just for a review, so this would come back to council to give probably further direction. All in favor? None opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Old school.
That's right. And Councillor Soldo, would you like to make the next motion as well?
Sure. I move that the zoning text amendment number T17 cannabis retail service stores regulations bylaw number 4979 be read a second time.
First time.
First time. I'm on the front page. That's why.
First time. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Second. All in favor? None opposed? Carried.
Okay.
And you can continue a second time.
That zoning text amendment number T17 cannabis retail stores regulations bylaw number 4979 be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
No questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? I think that passed. And continue.
I move that the zoning text amendment number T17 cannabis retail stores regulations bylaw number 4979 be advanced to a public hearing on February 4th, 2019 at 6 p.m. in the City Hall Council chambers.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? None opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
On to item H, correspondence for action. We have item number 1 from Dr. Owen Brown, a letter dated December 27th, 2018, requesting that council consider hosting an Xterra triathlon event, which I think is a very exciting request. Would somebody like to make the motion? Councillor Corbeil.
I make the motion that the letter dated December 27th, 2018 from Dr. Owen Brown requesting that council consider an Xterra triathlon be received and referred to staff for consideration.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Great. Any questions? Councillor Paulson?
In his letter, he kind of indicates that he would like this to be a city-driven project. And speaking from experience, we don't have the staff size or capability to really run an event like this and of this size to do the, but this event needs to be volunteer driven, and maybe we could have a designated employee from Parks and Rec or something that, as a liaison, but
As a point person.
as far as being a community or city driven, I just don't think we have the staff wherewithal to actually drive the project from within.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely. I think that this has potential to be a great thing for our
Yeah,
community.
absolutely.
And I think there's probably a group of dedicated people out there who would love to help bring it to town. And if the city can provide support to that, that's great. So I think if we refer it, we will, back to staff, we'll likely hear more on it in the future. Any questions?
Director Thorpe, am I speaking out of school?
No, she's nodding back there. She's nodding. Great. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And item 2, From the Community Arts Council of the Alberni Valley, we have a letter dated December 27th, 2018, requesting a building assessment to allow for planned building upgrades and grant applications. And I just want to add to this conversation that at the 100 Plus Women Who Care event last week, the Community Arts Council was the successful recipient of their funding. So they received around $20,000. There's not an exact amount yet, but that should, go a long way toward helping with some of the challenges that they're seeing. I'm sure that doesn't completely address it though. So would somebody like to make the motion we have? Councillor Solder?
I'll move that the letter dated December 27th, 2018 from the Community Arts Council of the Alberni Valley be received, and Council for the City of Port Alberni direct staff to bring forward a report and recommendations on the next step.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Are there any questions? Councillor Haggard?
I asked this question this morning at the in-camera meeting, and the CEO said I should bring it forth at the regular council meeting. So my question to staff is, we have a lot of city-owned assets that we lease for $1 a year. Has there ever been any thoughts or discussions, instead of leasing these city-owned assets for $1 a year, selling these city-owned assets for $1, and then they're responsible for the maintenance costs, and then we're off the hook for any further costs for leasehold improvements? Can you comment on that, please?
CAO?
Wow.
I think he's going to say we are off the hook for them.
I think the intent was that we would continue ownership and guaranteed public access and whatnot, and we would be off the hook in terms of maintenance costs. But that's not generally been our experience. Some of our tenants do better than others, obviously, and as time has moved on and volunteerism has changed, and grant funding has changed, it's left some of our tenants in a tough spot, and some of our properties are deteriorating. So I'm probably going to get to answer the question, but I think one thing we need to do is really oversee these better. So we tend to sign leases and then be an absent landlord, and we need to have somebody on the city team dedicated to maintaining or managing the tenancy. And if buildings are not being maintained or properties not maintained, we need to be on that sooner. So that's certainly the ball's in our court for that. Could we dispense of those properties and then get out from under the operating costs? That's one strategy. And there's some buildings that might lend themselves more to that than others. Some of these have come to the city as they've been bequeathed to the city. And I don't know in some cases if we'd be allowed to get rid of those, or if there would be some other ways we have to divest ourselves of them. If council's interested, we could take an inventory of our properties and come back and support council having a discussion about that, if you like. I can tell you I have talked with at least one group about and said basically, why don't you just take it over? And they've said, no thanks. Like, what volunteer group would want to own an older building? Yeah. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer. I don't know. In my memory, I don't recall having a discussion at council about actually giving these away or selling them for $1, but it's something we could consider.
And most of these are very old arrangements. And I think it's important to note that our leases are very clear that we are giving the use of these buildings for $1 a year, but we are not retaining the responsibility to repair or maintain them. So that's a requirement of our lease, that it's done by the operations that are taking them over. What ends up happening, or what has ended up happening, is that the societies don't have enough money, and then they come to council to do that, and it becomes a council decision of whether or not we want to go outside of the lease. And sometimes those decisions are challenging because, the Community Arts Council is a great group, and Roland Arts Centre is an amazing place, and who would want to see it shut down? Just like Abbey Field, we paid for their roof, and that was a requirement of their lease that they maintain it on their own. The curling club has been similar. I think there are a number of situations where we have $1 a year leases, and there's not enough money to maintain the building. So I agree with you, something else does need to be done. We either need, as a city, to be budgeting to fix these buildings, or we need to be taking a hard stance and saying, we didn't budget for it, you didn't budget for it, but it's not our responsibility. And sometimes we have to be able to say, no, we can't fix every building out there. Did you have any further?
An emergency, right?
Yeah, and all of the emergencies are worthwhile emergencies. They're all good causes, but we just don't have endless money.
one of the first rules of being a business is that you have to protect your assets, which is taking care of your buildings. But I do agree we can't always say yes to every request that comes forward. So maybe we need to just explore the idea with some of these groups. I mean, we're not making any money off it anyway, and if it's an older building, if somebody's willing to take it over, maybe that's an option that we can look at some point. Not tomorrow, but, at some point.
Thank you. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just on the same track as Councillor Haggard with our $1 a year properties, and was wondering if we could get that list of $1 a year properties, and perhaps the building inspector, if he has free time, could go do a walkabout through our $1 a year buildings and perhaps find something so we could do preventive maintenance rather than, do before it gets to be too big a job.
I think as a start, it would be great to have a list of how many $1 a year leases we do have, or how many leases we have where we feel there may be some risk to the city of being asked to maintain them. Okay. Councillor Solda.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the Community Arts Council's building, the Roland Arts Center. I was involved in there like day one when it first came across. I actually worked in that building as an art specialist. But what I want to say, that was bequested to the city, and I don't know if we can get rid of things like that. Now, in that list, maybe you could put that down. The Rolands, they donated it. They donated quite a bit of stuff to different people in the city, did they not? If I go back in history, I think the Community Arts Council, they've done a really good job of what they've done with that building. I mean, they've spent the money. They didn't come back for years to the city for money. They did get, of course, a tax exemption, and they've been really good in this community. And a lot of people have gone through the center. Tourists go through the center. I think it's worthwhile to really look, and I'm looking forward to seeing the report on that. It's very rare that they do come, and we all know the arts. Their grants with the province and that, they are getting less and less. And like anything, that's the first thing they cut is the arts. And arts is really important in this in all communities. So I'm looking forward to it, and I just wanted to bring that up.
Great. Thank you. CAO?
Madam Mayor, can I add what I think Council already knows is that I can't think of a single tenant in one of these buildings that doesn't provide value to the community.
I agree.
And I think we're all agreeing to that. The model doesn't seem to work. And because we're not inventorying funds to maintain these buildings, they come as unplanned expenses, which is very difficult for us.
Yep.
So it's not about the groups aren't valid or providing service. It's about the way we manage them, I think.
Fair enough. I agree.
And I think there's a greater conversation there than around, if we're talking then about having a manager manage all of these assets that we're intending to not be our assets anymore, then what does that do to the rest of the assets that we have that we're also struggling to maintain? At some point, we just have to say there's too much for us to do with the tax dollars that we have. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Poon, Councillor Corbeil, Councillor Haggard?
I just want to make it clear, Councillor Sola, I'm not against the Community Arts Council. I'm very in support of them.
I know you are.
I'm just, in general, I'm
Yep,
talking
for sure.
generalities. Thank you. I just want to make that
Same.
clear.
I knew that.
Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. There are no proclamations, so item J, informational correspondence. City Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A few items. Minutes from the Air Quality Council's December 6th meeting. BC Transit provides a copy of their 2017-2018 annual performance summary for the Port Alberni conventional transit system. Ecom 911 congratulates Mayor and Council on the recent election and extends an invitation to tour their Ecom facility in Vancouver. UBCM advises that they are distributing the second of 2 Community Works Fund payments for 2018-2019 in the amount of $419,557. BC Hydro provides a copy of their Vancouver Island Community Relations Annual Report, as well as a report on the storm damage that occurred on December 20th. And lastly, the Museum and Heritage Commission provide the minutes of their December 5th meeting.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any items you want to pull out there? Councillor Paulson.
I just want to make comment on number 2, which is BC Transit, and I'm not sure BC Transit made a presentation at the departmental presentations last Monday or not, but anyway, when I looked through the report, I was actually dismayed at the low ridership that we have in transit here in Port Alberni, the annual ridership numbers, and also something. I understand that the province and the municipality has to provide transit, but I don't know what the answer is, because the recovery rate on subsidy was really low, like it's like 11% or something like that, and that's a really heavily subsidized service when you're subsidizing almost 90%. So I just wanted to make comment, and I know that transit will probably come before us to make a presentation shortly as well too. So just observations. I was disappointed at the number of riders.
Any other comments? I just want to comment on the BC Hydro letter. They talk in there about their community re-greening program, as well as a number of other community grants available. And I think that that's something that, as a community, the re-greening one is interesting to me, particularly because of my love for trees. But there are a number of grants in there that I think could be very useful to our community. And I would move that we refer this to our Parks, Recreation and Heritage and see if they see any opportunities for us to apply for grants.
So moved.
Seconder? And any questions on that? All right, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And on the informational correspondence, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to make that motion?
I make the motion that the informational correspondence, items numbered 1 through 6, be received and filed.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Second. Any questions on anything else? All in favor? Carried. We have no report from in camera today. So item L brings us to council reports. Today we have combined, instead of having 3 separate items, we just have council and regional district reports. We don't feel we need to do 3 separate reports and 3 separate motions. So I will go through and just allow councillors to highlight anything. I just want to thank council for providing fantastic written reports, except for Councillor Paulson, who struggled with a man cold over the holidays, as he told us. So, but really enjoyed reading everybody's reports. And
scientifically proven to be worse.
Scientifically proven to be worse, apparently. Anyways, it was nice reading through the reports. It was interesting, I found, to see that quite a few people went to the same meetings but brought different things back from them. So I think that's the beauty of written reports, is we do hear more sides of what happens at these meetings, and it's a great way to communicate. Councillor Washington, if there's anything you want to highlight.
I think the one I'd like to I had a quick meeting with Brad Berry, and he had purchased that building in question, 2600 block of 2nd Avenue, and went to work on it right away, and promised us and the neighbors that in this part of the new year that he'd have it all cleaned up and scrap metal sent to the scrap metal place and have a nice clean, one less thing for our bylaw inspector to worry about. So I thought that was very positive.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard?
One thing this community has been struggling with for years and years and years, as long as I can remember, is signage to Port Alberni. So I was at a meeting at the Chamber of Commerce, and a very well-known, high-profiled First Nation artist is applying for grant funding, and he has agreed to use his art as a welcome signage to Port Alberni, and we're just trying to determine the best location for it. So I'm very excited about maybe finally getting a welcome to Port Alberni sign.
That's fantastic. Hey. Councillor Paulson.
Contrary to my report, which is not here, I was a very busy little boy. In particular, a highlight would be my total immersion in the week-long Road to the World Juniors hosting here in Port Alberni, and I want to thank Madam Mayor and councillors for the welcome reception for the Kazakhstan team. The two events that were held, the two public events, were highly successful, like so well attended, and it was nice to see that building chock-a-block full. And we've received, in hindsight, we've received kudos as a community from Hockey Canada, which is the national body for hockey representing, and just commenting on how great a job our community did in that respect. And the only other thing I'd like to say, and it could be in the report for next council, but I attended the Celebration of Life Line of Duty Death Service yesterday, and I just want to comment on how emotional and moving that formal event was yesterday, honoring a firefighter. She died of a rare form of brain cancer that has been identified as a hazard to that particular occupation. And I want to thank the Maple Ridge Fire Department for coming to Port Alberni and participating in that event, in particular, taking care of the details of the formalities. And it was an interesting spectacle to behold, and what a great honor for one of our fallen. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Yeah. I think I want to highlight the tour of the major city projects. You know, since being elected, people in Port Alberni are always saying, there's nothing happening in Port Alberni, there's nothing going on. But when you take a major project tour and you see what's happening, wow, what a difference. You see some things, and it's visible, but there's a lot more happening. And I think the public is not aware of, and eventually they will. And I think it's such a positive. So people need to be more positive of what's going on. And I think that was quite a highlight for me to do, was to take that tour. I also want to touch on the health officials. I met with VIHA, and interesting enough, they booked Solda's Restaurant to go and have this meeting. And it's nice to see that they are still inviting potential doctors to come to our community, and they actually were wining and dining a psychiatrist to come to Port Alberni, ironically, and her husband is in the medical field too. So it was a family, and I was telling her all about Port Alberni and how her teenage kids would love Port Alberni and the sports and the outdoor life, and I know they're still working on that. And so if people are thinking that we're not trying to get our doctors here, the hospital they're still working on this. And I'm told there is a doctor who's signed, another surgeon will be coming to Port Alberni. So there's a lot of things that are happening. So everybody just needs to have a little bit of patience. I know we like it done yesterday, but there is things happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
A couple things. I went to the my first meeting of the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation, and as you've seen today, Mr. Sears made a report. They're a very professional organization. They're trying extremely hard to, I think, grow the business for the betterment of the Alberni Valley, and I look forward to working with them in the future. I went to my first meeting of the School District 70, which I found to be pretty interesting. I just sat back and listened and really just get my feet wet, I guess. And we had a meeting along with Councillors Haggard and Paulson. We met with the Rural Coordination Center. They were doing sort of an outreach to rural communities. And there's some interesting things. For example, Kelowna is considered rural, which is a little surprising to me. And they talked about recruitment and retention of doctors, and it was an opportunity for me to talk about one of my pet peeves, I guess, is the issue around helicopter evacuation, not only from forest industry incidents, which was where my background came from, but also from smaller communities where it's hours to the medical centers in Vancouver, and whether or not they were able to do much with what we spoke about, we'll soon see. But it was nice that they came and at least engaged us. So, kudos to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Poon.
Just a few highlights. I went to the Citizens on Patrol Christmas party on December 8th, and I met a large number of volunteers, and it was quite heartwarming to see the support we have in our community to ensure our safety and security. And I also, on December 11th, went around the uptown area and met some of the merchants and just tried to understand some of the issues that they're facing. And then also on, there's a few other things, but I won't really need to mention them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will move that council reports outlining recent meetings and events related to the city's business be received. Is there a seconder? And all in favor? Carried. Thank you. So on to new business. Before we get to item 1, which is nominations, I just want to comment that a comment was made to me about these nominations, that it would be nice if these came to council first before we attach a name to them. So I think going forward, that's a great idea, and then this council can discuss who we want to nominate. That said, these two both did come directly from Councillor Solda, and I think it makes sense to certainly nominate. I'm supportive of nominating her for these two positions. Councillor Solda, would you like to make the motion?
Sure. I move that the City of Port Alberni support the nomination of Councillor Solda to the position of Director at Large with the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Washington?
Thank you. Being proactive, I'll start by saying when Councillor Solda is successful in ascertaining these positions, I need to ask, is she to be reimbursed for her attendance at meetings? Sorry. When she attends her meetings, is she to be? Is the groups that she's going to, the meetings where she's going, are they going to take care of her, or is there any cost to the city if she gets on these boards?
Great question. Councillor Solda?
These are positions I held before. They're nothing new, and they are reimbursed by the association and by the UBCM.
City Clerk?
Madam Mayor, Councillor Solda is correct with the AVICC. They do pay for expenses and also provide a per diem for attendance at those meetings. The Prime Corps Board, all expenses associated with attending those meetings are the responsibility of the local government.
Oh, that's something new, because last time it was.
Yeah,
okay.
They have 4 meetings a year in person in Burnaby, and and local government is responsible.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? So on the first motion for AVICC, all in favor? Carried. And Councillor Solda, the second one?
I move that the council for the City of Port Alberni support the nomination of Councillor Solda to the Prime Corp BC Board of Directors.
And is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And Councillor Paulson.
Just under new business, if I could make a motion to have council invite the BC Assessment Authority to come as a delegation at their earliest convenience, hopefully next council meeting, but any time shortly after that. I know most of us have received our assessments, and some of us were shocked and floored, but it'd be nice to have them here and just kind of give an overview of their mandate and kind of how they arrive at what they do. So if I could make that motion.
Thank you. I will second that because my assessment went up 60%. Are there any questions? Councillor Poon.
I'm not sure how relevant their visit will be because the appeals process is during the month of January, right?
That's right. So if they want to come to our next meeting, that would be great, but we think probably unlikely. I think it's still relevant for people to understand the process, and it might be nice to set up next year in December for them to come, if at all possible. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Any other new business from councillors? All right, on to question period. An opportunity for members of the public to ask questions. Would anybody like to come forward? Come on up.
Keith Ambrose, 3147 Second. It wasn't my intention to keep stepping in front of this mic and complaining, but I was trying to bring my complaints forward in a different manner, in a more helpful manner, I should say. I was trying to, think about them, bring them forward with positive suggestions. So and I tried this once before, I'm gonna try a different angle. So, Madam Mayor, with all due respect, you might be the youngest member of council, I believe. You're a little younger than myself. I'm now a senior, and I'm totally offended by what I see at meetings. Twice today, once accidentally, and throughout the whole meeting, there's been some cell phone distraction in the back here. Once there's an accident, I understand that. That's simply the, inadvertently not turning your device off. I don't possess any devices. My phone's on the desk. It won't bother you or anyone else, nor me. Picture taking. Now, I stand up here in front of a television camera, my choice. I would have it that way at a city council meeting, absolutely. But having your picture taken, or your backside when you're up here, I'm totally disapprove of having my picture taken by my family, by my friends, by my neighbors, by everyone. I don't pose for pictures. Not that I'm afraid of a picture, it's just something that's private. It's being abused in all fronts. So my stepson, he needs his phone slapped around once in a while too, and he can pick it up off wherever it lands. I'm still working on him. Please, you are the chair of the meeting, Madam Mayor. You have the opportunity to take a positive step. Maybe talk to some of your elders before you do so, but banning the use of devices of all kinds that are distracting would be helpful. Certainly, it's offensive to have your picture taken. It wasn't my picture that was taken, but it's still offensive to watch it happen. Particularly, any picture should be invited by the one getting their picture taken. You want to pose, stand up. That's the way it should be. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that forward, and I'll just let you know that at some point this council will be talking about our own code of conduct. So not necessarily what people who are in the room are doing, but I think cell phone use during meetings will be a part of that conversation. So from our end, at least, we will be having that conversation.
Yeah, it's disturbing all the classrooms. It's impacting all our students. It's impacting people for life. Certainly, it's not just students. It's full-grown adults that don't know how to handle a device. So just please take note of that a little guidance or sometimes a good, firm stance works. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Oh, come on up.
All right, so this is totally not in my wheelhouse or anything I've ever done. So we're building a bunch of different stuff over the next little while. We've been working really hard. And I don't really know much about the process.
Sorry, Joel, do you mind just introducing yourself for people who don't know you?
My name's Joel Marriott. Do I have to tell you my address or anything?
Sure.
All right, it's 8321 Faber Road.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we're going through, we're trying to learn a lot of different stuff about the city. We've been here for 4 years, watched a bunch of different stuff, worked in different places, done different jobs here. But over the next little while, we have a lot of stuff, a lot of growth that's going to be happening. We have a lot of partners throughout Canada that we're working with. And so my question is, how would I go around a process to learn how to involve the city with what we're doing? Because not necessarily is our business stuck here. It's e-commerce, so we're all over the place. But our house, office, and everything else is here. So we have a lot of plans, and we have a lot of stuff that are going. We have airlines, we have accommodations, plans everywhere all over the island. So is there a way for me to communicate with you guys here and try and organize a way for us to work together?
That's great. And for people who don't know, your business is Owl's Path Tourism.
Yeah.
That's the name of it. So I think it would be a great start for you to interact with our economic development manager, Pat, if you haven't interacted with him yet. So I think we just made a connection there. And I just want to say I really like what you're doing on social media. The videos have been fantastic.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from council on that? Okay. That's right.
Right. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, seeing no one else wanting to speak from the public, great. Would somebody like to move adjournment?
So moved.
Second?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.